Thanks for having me. My name is Jim Christopher, and you're going to be hearing about PowerShell for developers tonight. Just out of curiosity, how many of you are developers in this room? Work with stuff? How many? Keep your hands up if you're a .NET developer. All right, C#, VB, C#, VB. Couple. Okay. All right, we'll get to more questions in a second. My name is Jim Christopher. I run a very small company in Charlotte, North Carolina called CodeAls LLC. I always joke around with people, this is basically a front for me to make money so that I can work on open source software. And it is sort of true. I mean, it is sort of true. I started working for myself because basically I wanted to work on my own time. And doing this lets me do that. So we do a lot of work in spaces like education, gaming, defense, and recently IT admin is the new area that we're getting into. That's where a lot of the stuff we're talking about today is coming from. I'm a PowerShell MVP. It's kind of weird, right? Most of the MVPs in the PowerShell space are IT types, right? They work with Exchange and IIS, AD. And so like, we'll be in the room or be on the chat rooms together, and they'll be talking about the stuff. I have no idea what they're saying. I have no idea what they're talking about because I don't work with these things ever. Right? I'm a software developer. I build tool sets on PowerShell, and that I guess that's why they gave it to me. So if you have questions about Exchange, whatever, I can find somebody for you. If you want to learn how to manage Exchange or IIS with PowerShell, if you want to know how to develop tools on the PowerShell platform, I'm your guy. If you want to get a hold of me, the email address is fairly decent. I check it about once a day. I'm also on Twitter as bfarino, and I have a blog at beefycode.com. And somebody asked me to record this session tonight, so just be wary. Anything that you say tonight will end up on the internet shortly after the talk today. Okay, so I've already asked if you guys are developers, and that's good. I just gave a talk to a DBA crowd, and it was a bit different, so I'm happy to be back in my element. How many of you guys have never touched PowerShell in your lives? Okay, good, fair enough of you. That's very typical, right? How many of you guys have come from a Unix background? Even less, okay. And how many of you guys work with Visual Studio on a day-to-day basis? Right. No? Just out of curiosity, the guys who didn't raise your hand, what are you working with? If you're not working in Visual Studio and doing .NET development? Or you just didn't raise your hand?
Well, you said day-to-day.
Oh, okay. You're absolutely right. I apologize. Maybe. All right. Okay, but when you do software development, it's inside of Visual Studio? Okay. All right. So Visual Studio is a tool, right? And as software developers, we work with tools every day. We make tools every day. And I've done this for about 16 years now, and I've found that these tools fall into one of two camps. The first is what I would classify as a very specialized tool. And this is the metaphor I use for this, are these specialized wrenches that you see on this wall behind me. So if you're working on an engine, let's say, anybody mechanic in here, do any kind of mechanical engineering or tinkering, right? Right, so you can have an engine, you have the engine blocks out of your car, and you have to tighten a very specific bolt on that engine, right? You can come up to this wall and you can pick the one wrench that's going to fit that bolt, and it's a solid piece of steel and it's not going to break. And right, when you move on to the next bolt, it may fit, it probably won't, right? Because there's lots of different, so you have to go back to the wall and another one. So these specialized tools are very good. They don't break. They're very good at solving a very specific task. They don't travel well, right? So if the engine's on I-40, you can't really take the wall wrenches with you. You have to have a truck to do that, right? So the second classification of tools is a general tool for all tasks. And the metaphor I use for this is the crescent wrench. This will fit practically any bolt on your engine block. Oh, by the way, when I was in college, I put myself through college as a stagehand, and this was the only tool we ever carried. It's fit in our back pocket, filled all the bolts on stage, and it, also served as a hammer, a chisel, a wedge. As someone pointed out, it opens beer bottles as well. Meets all of the union guidelines. But this is not a specialized tool. This is a general tool, right? Especially if you're going to use it to open beer bottles. But it's got moving parts, right? And it can expand and contract to fit different size bolts. And does anybody have any experience with these? Using these? Where do they break? They're going to break. Right, this gets dirty, right? Or it gets out of groove and then it stops working. You have to go buy another one, right? Anyway, the reason I'm talking about branches instead of code or PowerShell right now is because I'm trying to set you in a mindset of comparing these two types of things, right? A wall of very specific tools, right, which I'm willing to bet is what you're used to right now. When you write code, you have designers and they do specific things, and if you're going to work with databases, you have a specific tool to do that. As opposed to a general tool, which is like, well, I can use that to work with things, right? Code or servers or what have you. So keep that dichotomy in mind as we're talking about things today. And my goal, right, here today, and I'm not being bashful about this, is to get you guys as developers thinking about using PowerShell as your general tool. Right? I mean, I'm all for specific tool sets when things are following the path that the tool set. Excuse me, sorry. No, you're fine. Do I have any? So when you're following the happy path that Microsoft has set out for you, the specific tools are great, right? But as soon as you start venturing off into unknown territory, I want you to start thinking about general tools in PowerShell. Okay. We're going to be talking about 3 specific tools today that are developer-centric tools. The first one is a tool called Sake, P-S-A-K-E, and that is a sort of a build manager, a build runner. Is anybody familiar with MS Build? Never heard of it, right? What you raise your hand? What is MS Build?
It's an active build where we add the code and build on top of that and find out when it happened or not.
Yeah, so it is literally the build engine that Visual Studio is built on. Takes your project file and figures out what all the dependencies are, and then builds your software, runs the compilers, and puts in the resources, and does all the stuff that you don't have to think about, and spits out a finished product, a DLL or an AXE or something. Sake is sort of a layer beyond that. Basically uses MS Build, but it allows you to add extra stuff. So like the example I'm going to show you today is how you can use Sake to distribute your build. If you have parts of your build that need to run on a special machine, you can move them over there. Which if you've anyone tried to extend MS Build, by the way? We'll talk about that a little bit later too. The second one is a project called Pester, and I just found this about 6 months ago. The version I'm going to show you is a version that I forked off of a guy. The creator is a guy named Scott Muck who works at ThoughtWorks, and he published Pester on GitHub. And Pester is it's a behavior-driven development framework for PowerShell. I don't really use it that way. I use it more as just a general unit testing engine. Does anybody do unit testing in here? Yeah, raise your hand, please. Hi. Be proud. Right? A couple of you. So I'm not going to spend as much time on these two. And this is only the second time I've talked about these two to an audience. And the first time I did it, people were just like, "Why would I ever use these?" Right? So I'm going to try to get the why across to you. And if you have any questions about the how, you can come back to me. Because they're when you first time you see them, they're not pretty. This last one is this project called Studio Shell. This is something that I created at the end of last year in open source on CodePlex. Has anybody heard of this? Just out of curiosity. Studio Shell is a PowerShell host inside of Visual Studio that lets you interact with the Visual Studio SDK. So anybody familiar with Resharper? Yeah. There's also a Just Code, which, by the way, I have a license for Just Code to give away at the end of the talk. Anybody familiar with that? So there's this huge SDK behind Visual Studio, and people make their careers off of knowing it, right? So if I don't want to have a career in the Visual Studio SDK, I just want to make little tools and go back to my paying job. So I got tired of interacting with the SDK, so I created this wrapper in PowerShell called Studio Shell. All right. You guys have any questions about this before we move on? You guys have any questions at all before we move on? All right. And unfortunately, since PowerShell is pretty typey, as in I have to type on the keyboard a whole bunch, I'm going to have to sit down back here. but I'll move this so you can see me. All right, so most of you raised your hand and said, I've never used PowerShell in my life. And so just by a show of grunts, how many of you would really like to see just how to get around? Yeah, good, okay. That's it, right? Very exciting. Right? How many of you are looking at this going, I really just want to go, but he's got that license, adjust code, I don't want to hang around. Seriously, does anybody want to leave? We're looking at this, think this, okay. Most of the time you can see a couple of people in the audience and they just kind of like the whole top half of their body just kind of gets hard, right? Because they don't want to be here. They want to be clicking on stuff. All right. So and when I walked in here, somebody described PowerShell as, what was it, DOS
growth hormone.
DOS on growth hormones. It's going to look that way for quite a while, but I'm going to dispel that myth by the end of the night. Right? You just made that my goal. All right. So, and you know, you're joking around. It is very similar to DOS. You can do a lot of the DOSy things that you do in a console window, right? So I can do dir, and what does that give me? Yeah, it gives me a list of files in the directory. Asked if anybody came from a Unix background, and the reason why is because can you guys see that bottom line? Okay, good. It is showing up. So
you can see the left side, leftmost side. Couple of columns.
Let me see if I can't get this console to be a good size here. Is that better? All right. So I asked if anybody came from a Unix or Linux background. PowerShell is actually very Unix friendly in the sense that it recognizes a lot of the same commands. So I just typed ls. Right? What is that? Yeah, ls. And it's the Linux equivalent to dir. Right? You'll find a lot of that in PowerShell. A lot of the commands that, if you know commands from a Linux environment, they translate over. Not exactly. The parameters are probably going to be different, but you're that much closer to being at a spot where you can get your work done. You can run any program on here. Like if I want to start Notepad, I can just type Notepad and start Notepad. Right? So on the surface, this really is just a DOS console. Right? And that's the last time I'm going to say DOS tonight. I'm telling myself, I'm not telling you. It's the last time I'm going to say the word DOS tonight. Right. So at that point, the similarities really fall apart. The first thing I'm going to show you, typically when I teach people like how we're getting around in PowerShell, there's 3 commands that I like to teach them. And the reason I always come back to these 3 commands is if you watch someone in IT as they're interacting with PowerShell, even if they're experienced, right, they always come back to these 3 commands. They don't have to remember what it is or how it is they're going to get something done. They know what they need to get done, and they use these commands to figure out how they're going to do it. So just out of curiosity, does anybody have a guess as to what the first one would be? If you walk up to this and you don't know what to do, what should you type? Good guess. Yeah, help is a good one. So if I type help, I get back this really nice long verbiage from PowerShell telling me, you need to know about PowerShell, so let me tell you a little bit about it. And so I mean, there's a substantial amount of information in there. The actual full form of the command is get-help. Is the full sort of canonical version of that command. So what if let's do a task-oriented thing here. If I have to let's say I have to work with Windows services, right? Your boss comes in and tells you to what's an innocuous service that I could turn off without disrupting the presentation?
Right.
What's that?
IIS.
I don't have IIS installed in this machine. They don't have SQL installed in this machine. We'll find one. All right, but let's say your boss says, you have to turn off the Knuder service, right? And you're like, I have no idea how to do that from PowerShell. So what can we type? Well, we can type get help service, right? What do I know about services? What does PowerShell know about services? And what I want to point out is that if I type in get help and the word service, it comes back and it tells you these are all the things that I know about services. Right, so what do you guys see in there? If our job is to restart a service, the Knuder valve service, which doesn't exist by the way, I just made that up. But what do you see here?
Restart service.
There's a really good candidate right there, right? Restart service. Right?
Or get service, maybe.
Get service is another one, yeah. So the point is, like, I'm walking into the situation knowing what I have to do. I don't know how I'm going to do it. Right? So I'm interacting with PowerShell. I'm saying, hey, you, PowerShell, I want to know about services. What can you do with services? Well, here's a list of things. Good sir. It doesn't say good sir, but I wish it did. So let's try this. Right? If I type get service, it's kind of scroll by. The font's really huge here because I'm used to. So I'm in presentation mode right now. But what is that?
List of all services.
List of all the services that I have installed on this machine. Right? So that's what get service does, which kind of makes sense, right? If I use the command get-service, I would expect to get back some services. So at this point, I'm going to segue. And that was the first command, by the way, was get help, not get service. Get help is the first command that you need to write down. I see somebody writing it down. Thank you. But you need to remember it, right? It's the first place you're going to go to. Like, I don't know how to do this. You know, okay, I'm not going to go to Google or Bing. Excuse me. I'm not going to go to Google or Bing. I'm going to go to PowerShell and I'm going to type get help and then figure out what it is I can do. But what I want to point out is that, and you notice the list of commands we saw earlier, there's sort of a pattern to them. Did anyone pick up on that? Anyone want to comment on that? That's exactly the way Microsoft describes the convention. Right? Is that all the commands in PowerShell in their canonical form start with a verb. It's not always a verb. Sometimes it's an unverb. Like where is one. Where is not a verb. Right? But verb-noun is the syntax that they advocate you use for all these things. And in fact, nowadays PowerShell, if you create your own software for PowerShell, will complain if you don't follow this convention. Or if you use a verb that is not in the list of approved verbs. Like if you create a verb like my personal favorite, I've seen people use enable disable as a verb. It's in the list of approved things. So you get this big nasty complaint that people aren't going to be able to find your stuff. It's not going to be very usable. All right, so we have get service, and I still need to find an innocuous service I can turn off without destroying the presentation. Web client, that's a good one. Web client stopped.
32 times.
All right. So let me show you the second one here. The second one is get command. This is the second command that you need to know in PowerShell if you're going to go in there and start getting stuff done. Get command, and you'll notice that I typed the word service, but I surrounded it with those stars. And if you were working with files, what are those called? That's what they're called here. Right? So most commands in PowerShell support that sort of wildcard syntax. And if I hit enter there, we get back to a list that's very similar to our help. Right, but it also includes not just internal commands like get service, but you'll see it's finding stuff on the file system. Like, oh, there's some DLLs that have something to do with services too, etc. So that's a really good way. Again, if you need to hunt around and if you're hunting and pecking, trying to find something, get command is another really good one to know. So we found one restart service, right? So let's just run that. You want to run that? Let's run it. Okay, so if I type the name of the command, I want to restart a service, and PowerShell is going to come back to me and say, whoa. I have no idea what you want me to do. I know you want me to run this command, but right now I need you to give me some information. So the point of this exercise is to show you that while you can make a mistake in PowerShell, it's going to do everything it can to try to help you get your work done. So if you type restart service and you forget the service name, in this case, it'll come back and ask you. It says, well, I know you want me to restart a service. Which one do you want me to restart? So restart web client. And that's the only one I want. Oh, and I'm not even running as an administrator, so I can't do that. Great. A stupid demo. Anyway, we can keep moving on, though. So what was that first command that we talked about? Get help. And the second one was what? Get command. Git command is the second one I want you to remember. You don't have to remember git service. You'll find it again, I promise. But git command is the one I want you to remember. All right, so let's say, so we tried to use restart service and it didn't quite just work seamlessly. So let's see if we can't figure out why. If I type git help, which is the first one, right? Restart service. So git help and then the name of a command. PowerShell is actually going to spit back, again, reams of information about what this command is. What does it do? How do I invoke it? There's 3 different forms. Some lengthy description information. And my personal favorite part, if you need more information, down here at the bottom, it'll tell you what else to go look for. And this isn't even all of it, right? So git help sort of returns you the default set of information, but there's this there's an examples flag that you can pass to git help, and it will actually spit back example uses of the command. Right. So here's a good one: restart service WMI. I don't think I should do that here tonight. I doubt anything I'm doing tonight is relying on WMI, but right. So it'll show you a couple of examples, and if you just want to see everything there is to know about that command, you can use the full parameter, and it sends you back all the information you've seen thus far, plus some really detailed parameter descriptions. Right. Again, PowerShell's here to keep you at the keyboard getting stuff done. Right. You don't have to go to another application to start looking for help with these commands. All the help you need is right there. All right. All right, so we have git help, we have git command. Oh yeah, we were working with this before too, right? Git service, and that returned a list of services for us. So the last one that I'm going to show you, first off, I'm going to show you this technique. What does that character mean here? Let me get it at the top. Pipe. Yep, thank you. But what is that? It's a pipe character, but what does that mean in PowerShell? Anyone know?
Or something like that.
Another.
Okay. Yeah, I'm hearing it. Yeah. So I'll go ahead and type the next command. Yeah. So just to clarify, that up and down, straight up and down line is called a pipe. You didn't know. Very Unixy kind of thing. You don't see it a lot in docs anymore. Gotta put $1 in the jar. But what that means is basically take the output of this git service command, right, and use it as input for git member. Right? Like I said, it's a very Linuxy, Unixy kind of thing to do. But there's a very key difference between the way PowerShell treats this piping activity and the way Linux and Unix does. And the guys who have worked on Linux, and even those of you who haven't, who know the answer, if I type this in on Unix, and let's pretend that these commands actually exist and they work, what comes out of git service and gets passed into git member? Anyone know? Text. Yeah, strings. Right? And that's what we used to call the parse and pray mentality. Like, I really hope the output of this command hasn't changed, because if it has, then all of my IT management scripts just aren't going to work anymore. But I'm going to go ahead and run this as a way to introduce piping in the last command that I want you to know. So the last command here is git member. Is the last command that I want you to know. Command number 3. So all you .NET types in the room, of which I am one. What do you guys see here? What is this?
Methods, properties.
Methods and properties, yeah. Yep. So these are things you're probably very familiar with if you work in C# or VB. They're object-y kind of things, right? You want to access set and receive properties. You can subscribe to events. You can call methods, right? Does anybody actually recognize that type name that has been spit out to the console?
Well, that's a name.
That's a .NET assembly.
That is a .NET type name. So this piping activity that I was referencing in PowerShell does not take text out. It doesn't take the text of git service and pass it to git member. What it's doing is it's taking, well, literally, git service is outputting a collection of objects, .NET objects. Right? And what you see happening on the console is just sort of the host interpretation of that object, and it's spitting out some text. But if you pipe the output from one command to another, the second command in the chain doesn't receive text; it receives objects. In this case, it receives a collection of service controller objects. Right. Yeah, I see some of you nodding your heads. That's really cool. Yeah, it is really cool. Because then you get out of that parse and pray mentality, right? And you know, as long as the objects are coming through with the right type, you're type safe. And you
Can
can
you say that again? When you pipe it, it sends the actual object?
it's sending objects, .NET objects.
Okay.
From the output of get service is actually a collection of these service controller objects. If you don't pipe it anywhere, it sort of defaults to displaying in the host, which is the console here, and it just sort of lists them, lists their names. But if you tack on a series of pipe segments, there the objects go from one pipe segment to the next. And just as long as we're talking about piping, you can get arbitrarily complex with it. They can be as long as you need them to be. So, for example, here there's a really handy one called where object. And what do you guys think this does? Filters. Yeah, it's a way to filter the list of objects that are coming through the pipe. Syntax is a little funny. You can make Perl jokes if you want. But we'll do our name matches anything that starts with S. There's got to be one in there that starts with S. Right. Let just introduce you. So I'm getting a list of services, piping it to this where object, and these squiggly brackets mean this little block of script that I want you to use for filtering. This variable we call $under means the current thing in the pipe. So it'll be called once for every service that comes down the pipe, and it'll execute this little bit of script. And if the name matches that regular expression, then it goes to the next sequence in the pipe. Okay. So just out of here, what is this going to output when I run it? Yeah, unless I've made a mistake, which I have. Add an extra one. All right, yeah. And again, these things can get arbitrarily complex, right? So where object, the name starts with this, and I want to format that as a list, right? Okay. I want to format that as a list, and I want to send that to the clipboard, right? And then I want to run Notepad and put it in there, right? See what I mean? So these pipelines can get arbitrarily complex, and it's like what I'm doing right now, you see people doing very frequently. They'll build up from sort of a very general command to a very specific pipeline that gets their work done.
And that was a pipe to the clip, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Which show that again a little bit higher up so folks in the back.
Yeah, absolutely. So you want to see that the pipeline again? Yep. In fact, what I'll do is that I can declare variables, right? Right. So $sign means variable name. $S equals get service. So what's S going to contain?
They get services.
Yep. So if I type $S. Yep. So and I can call that back at any time, right? So the pipeline, what I was saying is I can take the value of S and I'll pipe it to where object. $under name matches, or is a match to that regular expression, which starts with S, basically is what that means. Right. So there's that list, and I'll repeat that, and I'll store that variable in SS or S2. Let's move to S2. Right. And so now S2, whoops, $S2 contains just that list of services that start with S. I'll pipe S2 to format list, right? Pipe S2 to format list, and then I'll send it to this program called clip. Anybody familiar with clip? Yeah, it's just a program that you can send input to, and it just puts it right on the clipboard for you. It's a standard install on Windows.
Oh, it is?
Yeah, it's freely available on Windows, or freely. It's readily available on your Windows install. I think from. It might be Vista and later. I think it's an XP as well. So you guys have any questions about what we've been doing? You see how working with PowerShell is kind of a conversation. You know, if you know a few commands, you can use them to explore and figure out what it is you need to do. All right.
And to assign the variable, you just simply did $, some variable name equals.
Yep. So, and you can do anything you want. So I can assign it to a string if I want, and you can perform operations. Right, equals hello s plus world. Right. So a lot of the things that you would expect to be able to do with variables are there. So
That installs part of Windows 7 and Vista, or is it you have to download it? Or is it,
what is PowerShell?
yeah, is it part of the Visual Studio install?
No, it's PowerShell right now. The RTM version is 2.0, and that is available as part of the WinRM installation. It used to be very hard to find if you were looking for PowerShell. If you're looking for WinRM, it's very obvious, but I had no idea. Most people don't know that they're packaged together. Now, if you just Google or Bing PowerShell 2.0 download, you'll find it almost immediately. But yeah, Windows 7, it's installed by default. 2008 R2.
It's by default, I know that.
Yeah, it is by default.
Actually, gives you a little PowerShell icon.
That's right, they do.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, anybody following the feed out of Build? A little motivation, a couple of you. Does anybody hear anything about Windows Server, Windows Server 8? What's the default install footprint look like for Server 8? Does anyone know? It's a configuration called Core. Anybody familiar with the Windows Server configuration called Core?
Yeah.
Yeah. What's special about Core? No GUI. If you want to do anything, this is how you're gonna have to do it. Right? PowerShell's available, but that's it. So if you want to run IIS on Windows Core, which is and then again, they're towing the line now that it's a server. It doesn't have a UI. If you want to do something, this is how you're going to do it. So again, even though you don't work with administrative kind of stuff on a day-to-day basis, I guarantee you're going to have to come here sometime. I behoove you to just spend some time playing around with it and getting comfortable.
How long are those variables active? Is it just for those, like if you close that session, is it gone?
Excellent question. If I close this window, they go kaput. Like here, I set the variable s to the theme service, and remember when we did the get member, and we had all those methods and properties. If this were C#, we could access those, right? Or if this was VB, we could access those, and use the same technique or the same syntax you would use in those languages here on the console, so you can actually request their properties, execute their methods, etc. Right? Yeah. So again, and I mean the way that I kind of summarize this for people is it's an interactive .NET console, right? DOS on steroids. No more. Right, that's the last time I'm going to say DOS. Right. All right. What were those commands again? What was that first one? Thanks. And the second one? Yeah, and there was that last one too. What was that one? Thanks, guys. Okay. So, yeah, I'm doing pretty good. Any questions?
Can we use any other PowerShell command in this PowerShell? Like for example, AppFabric has its own PowerShell. Can I use that PowerShell command in this one?
Yeah. So most of the time, So like there are sort of units of PowerShell functionality that you can find online. AppFabric is one of them. Hyper-V is another one that I've been using a lot of lately. Most of the time, they distribute them in a couple of ways, but most frequently they distribute them in the form of what are called modules, which is you can think of those as sort of a unit of PowerShell stuff that you can load in and out. So I'll go ahead and show you this command, get PS module, which is not the right command. Don't write that down. Get module, and there's a list all. There's a list. And that shows you all of the modules that you have installed on your current box. And again, installing these things, there's no trick to it. It's just an Xcopy operation, right? you can go on MSDN, it'll show you how to do it. It's really easy. But you can define your own. I've defined one here called Git, and just to show you what that looks like. If I type Git right now, it's not going to know what that means. What is Git, by the way? Yeah, it's a source control for distributed version control. Yeah. So, and I have clients who use it, right? So I hear you guys laughing. But if I want to alter my PowerShell environment so I can use Git, I wrote this module called Git. So I invoke import module. The name of the module is Git. Right, and now it's modified my environment. You can see it actually changed the prompt there. Let me go someplace where I actually have a maybe Splunk. Of course. Let's not do that. So this is kind of hard to see because my path's really long, but I imported that Git module and it changed my session. It actually changed the way the prompt is written so that I can see what branch I'm working in when I'm working in my code. And of course now if I type Git, it knows what that means, right? And when I'm done, I need to remove module Git. It says, okay, cool, you're gone. And now if I type Git, it doesn't know what that means. Looks like I have a bug. I think I just trashed my prompt. But, all right, so again, modules. If you look up modules on the internet, you'll find a ton of them. And in fact, if you follow the feed, Windows 8 is shipping with something on the order of 300 modules. And Microsoft's line now is any group that's publishing any kind of administrative UI has to publish a PowerShell module to manage the functionality. Right. So again, you're starting to see like Hyper-V and iSCSI is another one that the disk manager, disk partitioning, all that stuff. Really sweet. Right. Okay. Any other questions before I close this console up? No? All right. What's next? All right, so the next thing I'm going to show you, I'm sorry, what was that? Someone have a question? What is that? No, you're fine. I'm hard of hearing, so like when somebody starts talking, I want to make sure I'm not missing a question or anything. So I lied, we're not getting out of the console yet. Why is it doing that? That is so irritating. Let's just do this. There we go. All right. So I'm going to import this module called Saki, which is the first developer tool that I want to show you. Again, Saki is created by a guy named James Kovacs, published on GitHub, and it is a build system that you can use for PowerShell. So I have this project for one of my clients called Zenith. I'm going to show you part of the build here today. So first step, I import the module Saki. The second step is I'm going to invoke Saki, and what that's going to do is run my build. But first I'm going to show you, well, actually first I have to look something up. And I want to, is it target? So I just want to make sure I don't run the wrong part of the build because it requires a Hyper-V install that I don't have here. Nope. Target task. All right, so have any of you ever run an MS build on the console? Just like run? No, right? Yeah, it's kind of rare, right? Quite frankly, if you don't have to, why would you, right? Because Visual Studio does it for you, right? And it takes the output and.
Well, you see it in your little output screen.
Yeah, right. Yeah, you see all this stuff going by in the output screen. Yeah,
that's about it.
Yeah, isn't this exciting?
It's the Matrix.
Yeah. I'll go ahead and stop that. So basically, if I
You got a test on that.
test, can you guys parse that real quick? All right, but the important thing I want to show you right here is that the initial part of that build was literally just it's just invoking MS Build, right? So if you actually look, it's just calling the Microsoft Build engine, right? And this is the same thing that Visual Studio does, right? So why would I want to come to the command line to run a build? Well, before I answer that, let me show you another reason why this is really convoluted and people don't like it. And you'll really be sold. So this is this is what a Saki build file looks like. Right? How many of you think this looks like a make file? Who knows what a make file is? Actually, I just dated myself. All right, good. Yeah. So it looks a lot like a make file, but it's actually very declarative, and I actually like it a whole lot, and I'll explain why. So in a nutshell, all you have is this task keyword, right? And that's all you define is a sequence of tasks. Task has a name. This one's called verify configuration. It has a description, which in this case is set to some variable value, and a script block that does some stuff. And you can arrange these tasks such that you can find a good one. Yeah, here's one. So you see this task named build, and it depends on that verify configuration. Right? So whenever I say, hey, run the build, the first thing I got to do is verify configuration. So it goes and runs that task, and then it comes back here and just calls MS build, right? And then invokes some command line and spits it out. And I have one for clean. And there's rebuild, which you can see is just a forks off to clean and build, right? But again, Visual Studio does all that for me. Why would I want to come in here and replicate all of that, all of those features? And actually, if anybody does unit testing, I do unit testing all the time. In fact, I do any kind of testing I can find. If I can automate it, I'm going to, right? Because that covers my derriere and the clients as well. So, so here we have three tests. I have four test targets in here. Well, the first one is called test, and that's basically just a proxy. It calls the rest of them. I have this test local, and that means test local here on this machine. And basically, it just comes down here and runs. Where is it? There it is. Basically, runs a command, runs another script that contains a list of tests that run on this local machine. Again, Visual Studio will do this for you. Why come out here and do it? Here's why. I also have this task, test hypervisor. And this client basically paying me to create a PowerShell front end that will connect a Hyper-V system to their management software, right? So I have these tasks that won't run anywhere unless there's a Hyper-V environment installed, right? And the only place I can do that is a Windows 2008 R2. Can't install it as a VM, which is the way I like to normally do those kinds of things. It has to be running on a physical box. So what I have here is a task that will run, those tests that will only run on my hypervisor. And I can actually send them out. I can do this invoke command, computer name, whatever the hypervisor name is, and I want to execute the script block, which quite literally does some magic and then calls this invoke hypervisor tests. And I get back the results. Quite literally, this one is like 7 lines of code. Takes the script block, pushes it to another computer, runs the tests over there, gives me the results back in this variable and lets me look at them here. Yeah. Okay? That's why I go to Visual Studio to run my tests, because I can do stuff like that. So, and again, you know, I was talking before about general and specific tools, right? If you're just building a DLL, Visual Studio is great, right? Because you don't have to worry about calling the compiler, or calling this build, or modifying the project file. If you have to vary from that path, and this is why I asked about MS Build earlier, if anyone's dug into that. If you ever have to extend MS Build, it is such a pain, right? Because you have to, not only do you have to create the task that you have to complete, in this case, run these tests on that hypervisor and collect the results and put it back in the build output for me. But now you have to create this special MS Build interface so that you can put it in this XML file, and then you have to edit the XML file to load your DLL. Oh, and then Visual Studio is going to complain because you have special stuff in that project and it doesn't want to load anymore, right? So the pain to veer off of that path with the Microsoft toolset is incredibly large for me. I don't want to deal with that, right? So as soon as I veer off that path, I come here. I do this. So again, I don't want to go into a lot of detail about Saki. It's a great tool. I use it all the time, but I think if I show you too much more of it, you're gonna your head's gonna explode. So, does anyone have any questions about Saki? If not, I'll move on to Pester. No? Okay.
Sorry, quick question. That socket, is that what is that doing? Is that what's allowing what you just did there? What is that? What does that do that PowerShell doesn't do?
Okay, well, that's a great question. So the question is, what is Saki doing that PowerShell doesn't let you do? Saki's built right on top of PowerShell. All it's doing is defining a special function there called task that lets me create a file that's just a PowerShell script.
Mm-hmm.
And it creates it in a very readable fashion, as opposed to, like, say, an old school make file, which reads like stereo assembly instructions. But this literally says, like, I have a task name build, and it just defines a function named task that accepts a name parameter, right? In fact, let me crack open the
so the socket
module.
Creating a bunch of tasks that you can run or kick off at any time you want. Right?
Yeah, and it defines a. We'll do. Holy cow. Let's see if this works. Git help Saki. Git command Saki. Module Saki. All right. This is a list of all the commands that are inside of the Saki module. And Saki's just PowerShell, and all it's doing is defining a couple of extra commands that PowerShell can use inside of scripts. One of them is task. Right? Remember the task keyword we saw? That's it. So if I look at actually, let me ask you, if I want to learn more about task, what do I need to do? Hey, good idea. You see, they just defined a couple of PowerShell commands. One of them is called task, takes in a name, takes in a script block, has a bunch of other stuff in there I almost never use, right? Yeah.
How do you avoid the name conflict? So, for example, you're not even put like a Saki dot task. You might have asked other places.
Yeah, there is a way around that. Which, by the way, I've been working with PowerShell since it was called Monad, and I've never had that happen.
What?
I've never had a collision, but there is a way around it. You basically have to preface the name of the command with. Well, there's two ways. One, I think you preface the name of the command with the module it contains, so it would be Saki whack task. I think, and then the second way is when you import the module, there's a parameter you can use to prefix all the commands.
That's why I actually go back to. I was about to ask you about when you import the modules, right?
Mm-hmm.
You didn't even. I mean, I don't know how you set it up, right? So when you import the module, you got to set up somewhere to know where to load those modules in, right?
Yeah.
You just import the module, you get into the directory, but do you have to, space config somewhere, to?
That's where PowerShell looks for.
Oh, okay. You have a path there. Okay.
Yeah, there's a special environment variable that contains a list of paths. That's where it's going to load. And in fact, the fun thing, you can edit that. If you want to put modules in a special place, you can edit that if you want. Right. So one of the things that was in that question, oops, and I believe there's a parameter on this import module. Yeah, there it is. See that prefix right there? If you add that parameter when you do the import, it will replace, or it'll prefix all the nouns, all the nouns and the commands with whatever that prefix is. So in this case, or if it doesn't have a noun, I'll do it at the beginning. So if you do like Saki dot or something, it'll prefix it with that. So, and that's another way to avoid collision. It's a good question. That's the first time anyone has ever asked me about that. All right, any other questions about Saki or modules or PowerShell or life or anything else? No? The hair? I got a lot of questions about the hair. All right. And the other thing I was going to show you is Pester. So this is actually one of the test scripts from that project that I just ran, and this is one of the guys that runs on the hypervisor. And this is what we call a Pester script. And here. And then, again, just so you see the pattern here, import module Pester, right? Pulls the Pester functionality in, get command module Pester. Right? These are all the things that I can do. The only one you ever really interact with on the path is this invoke Pester. Right? Just like invoke Saki, invoke Pester. But you can see it defines this, there's two key functions it describes. One is it defines, one is called describe, the other one is called it. And with those defined, we can create these little test scripts that are very readable. Anybody here familiar with like RSpec or SpecSpore or any BDD framework? No. Typically, the tests there are meant to be written by some kind of, well, in the Scrum world, I guess they're called. What's that?
Business analyst?
Yeah, like a VA or some. It's sort of in a natural language, right? And that was the goal with these pester scripts, is to create something that was fairly readable. And again, I had not succeeded in that regard, but you can see how you would come close, right? So describing this thing, right? Describe that thing, and then you have a script block. And then you have a sequence of tests. Describing that thing, it should do that, and there's a script block that tests whether or not that actually occurs. And again, I can create as many of them as I want. Let's see if I can get... let me find a good one here that I can run locally. So if I do invoke pester, and we will do PowerShell test, that's a good one. So I'm just calling invoke pester, and I'm passing it the name of the script that I want to execute. Okay. And it's coming back with a list of things, and actually that was a bad one. It was a bad one. But you can see what the output is, right? So the describing this sequence of tests I just created are actually dynamically generated, and they go through and make sure that all of the modules that I've defined for this client meet PowerShell guidelines, right? But this really should be the name of the module, and it's not, because I'm not running in the right environment. But you can see what it's spitting out here is the describing element, the it. So describing the module, it should do this, and then if you look over here, it'll actually tell you whether it's true or false, and whether it passed or failed, and if there's an exception, what the exception would be. Right? And again, is this text that I'm working with? Is this text that it's output to the console? Right. So if I look at this, it's actually an object that's coming back to the console, and it's a nice thing is like with using pester, I get back this object that represents a test result, and I can do things with it, right? Like if I want to send it out to a file, whatever. I messed something up. But there they are, right there. So if I cat that, right? But again, so it's testing framework. Get back. I can run the tests just from a very simple PowerShell script, and I get back objects that represent the results, and I can do whatever I want with them. All right, I'm losing you guys, so I'm going to move on to the cool stuff. All right. What's this? Is your comfort level rising now? No? All right. All right. All right. So this is Visual Studio, and I have a very complex project open over there, and I'm going to show you the last project here is a project called Studio Shell. Downloadable from Codeplex. When you install it, you'll get this Studio Shell entry on your view menu. So I'm going to go ahead and open that. We're back on the console.
Awesome.
So let me clear this. And again, this is so it's just this this Visual Studio window, and it behaves just like all the other Visual Studio windows, right? But it looks like a console. So if you open up open up that. Right, it's just a window, right? It's just sitting in there. But you can do all the PowerShell things you can do outside of PowerShell too, right? You can do DIR and LNS and all that stuff, right? All that stuff still works. So first thing is that this is just PowerShell inside of Visual Studio. Right, so remember all that stuff I did, all the builds I was running, everything. That's where this came from. I didn't want to leave Visual Studio to do that stuff. I wanted to do it in here. Over time, I started wanting to access features of the UI and the project framework and the code, things like that. And like I said, Visual Studio has this really massive SDK built into it that I really don't want to become an expert on, right? But I do want to create little tools. So what I did was I created something called a PowerShell provider around this SDK. And I haven't actually demoed those yet. So let me do that now. So if I'll CD over this drive and take a look around. Someone tell me where I am. I'm in my registry.
Yes.
Right? Yep. I'm in my registry and I'm working on the console. Right? How about, here's a good one. Where am I? My local certificate stores. Where am I now? I'm in my process environment. These are all my environment variables, right? So again, a provider takes some kind of hierarchy, some kind of container, and makes it look like a drive on your system. So PowerShell can actually go in and spelunk these things as if they were a file system. There's actually a set of commands that are designed to be ubiquitous across any of these providers, right? And they all end with the word item. And you can see there's 10 of them, right? And it's, I think it's pretty intuitive what these things do. What does new item do? Thanks. Creates a new item. Remove item takes the item away. So if you want to create a new file, you use new item. You want to create a new register key, you use new item. New certificate, new item. New environment variable, new item, right? And again, this is part of the not having to learn as much as you think you do to use PowerShell, right? So you just keep using these 10 commands. All right. Do you have any questions about the provider thing before I blow your mind? Yeah. Okay, so what I did was I took the Visual Studio SDK, which if you're familiar with any kind of SDK from Microsoft, there's objects and methods and properties and collections, and you enumerate all this stuff and everything. And I sort of turned that on its head, and I said, I want to use this from PowerShell in a very PowerShell-y kind of way. So I created a provider around that SDK, which is exposed to this DTE drive inside of this PowerShell console. So I go in here and I look around. These are basically the root parts of the Microsoft extensibility environment in Visual Studio that I can access. And I can go through these things using the same commands that I use for files and registry keys and what have you. So here's a really good example. I'll go into the window configurations and take a look around. I have 3 window configurations defined. Anybody familiar with a window configuration? You guys seen this before? No, you haven't. You know why? Because it's an aspect of the SDK that has not percolated up to the UI yet. Let me show you what it does. And I say yet, it hasn't percolated up yet. This has always been there. I just don't know why they don't let you access it. Right? Let's say that, here's a good one. Right? Let's say this is how I really want to work. Right? This is how I want Visual Studio to look whenever I open it up. I can go into my window configurations area and use the command new item to create a new item. I'll give it a name. I'll call it TDG. And hooray! And then I'll take a look around and let me get rid of some of the stuff so that we. Oh, great! I put focus on the toolbox. We're going to be here for 10 minutes while it fills out. So, you guys do any fishing or? Maybe I can get rid of it. Ah, there we go. All right. So yeah, but you see right there, I've got the new item there, TDG, and it's listed. And let's say I'm working again. I'm like, oh, I need my windows back. I can always just go invoke item, TDG, and it goes right back to where it was. Right? Shut up. Okay. Yeah, people love this, right? Because it's very handy. And up until a couple of weeks ago, I had this really cool system. So this laptop is my primary development machine. And I have a docking station at home and a couple of monitors and stuff, really nice setup. And I take all those little windows, like the error list and the all those little tiny windows, and I shove them over to one monitor. Right? And I have another monitor that's just my code window and my Studio Shell window, and I bounce back and forth. But if anybody else works in that situation, what happens when you undock while you're doing that?
They're stuck over there.
You bedlam, right? I mean, you have no idea where those things are. Like, you can't even get to some of them anymore. So for a while, I had two window configurations to find docked and undocked. And immediately before I would go undock my computer to go to the coffee shop or whatever, I do invoke item, DTE, whack window configurations, whack undocked. And it would rearrange my windows, dock everything back, and I could pull my laptop out and take it with me. And then when I go back, I dock it back in. I want to move all my windows out. I invoke the other one, and it sends them back. And I did that for a couple of months until I realized that this is PowerShell, right? Remember when I said anything I can do in PowerShell I can do in here instead of Studio Shell? Anybody familiar with WMI? Good. Try to keep it that way. No, I'm kidding. It's not that bad. It's like the Windows Management Infrastructure is what it stands for, and it is a sort of an object-oriented way to interact with IT administration objects on your computer or your network or devices or what have you. And what I found, let's see if I can't. Yeah. And I'm not going to pretend that I came up with this on my own. I found this, okay? So I figured, right, something knows when I'm docking and undocking my computer, right? Because all this other stuff happens. It beeps at me, and the screen goes off, and what have you. So I started digging around, and I found out that there's this registry key right there, current control set, control, something, something, something. And there's a docking state value in there that toggles when you dock and undock it. So I thought, okay, that's great. My computer knows when it's docked and undocked. How can I wire up my window configuration to that registry key? And there's this register WMI event, standard PowerShell command, basically says, I want you to call this function, invoke dock state window change, every time that registry value changes. Again, I didn't come up with this, I found it, okay? I'm not going to pretend that I'm a WMI expert. Right? And so basically, every 5 seconds, WMI checks to see if that registry value has changed. And if it has, it invokes that callback that I have there, which comes back into this function. And it comes back and looks at the value of the registry key, figures out whether the laptop is docked or undocked, and invokes the appropriate window configuration. Right? So now when I go to the coffee shop or I come home, I don't have to do anything. Right? Or I do now because these things are gone. But pull the laptop off, within 5 seconds, my windows are where they're supposed to be. Those are the kind of little tools that I'm looking to create, right? So if I was going to do this with a Visual Studio SDK, you're looking at a day at least to get something working. Right? End to end, this was about 8 minutes. And that includes the Google time to find the WMI thing. So ask questions as we go. Looks like I have about 15 or 20 minutes left, and there's a couple of things that I want to show you, right? But by all means, ask questions as we go. But you can see like the different areas you can access. We talked about window configurations in Windows is another one. If I do invoke item, DTE, whack Windows, whack output, it shows the output window, right? Command bars is another fun one. Get rid of that. Actually, no. You know what? Let me dock that and leave that up. I said. There it is. We'll do command bars, and we'll go to menu. Menu bar. It is. All right. So command bars are all this UI, that menu, those toolbars, the toolbars that are in those little tool windows too. And if I did a DIR inside of the command bars, you'd see a whole list of them coming by, right? And it literally takes like a minute and a half for all of them to scroll by. There's so many of them. So I'm jumping right down to the one. I know where it is. I know there's the menu bar, which is this file, edit, view, project, build, that thing, to the help, which is right over there at the end. All right, if I look at this, nope, Team Explorer. So you see those names in the name column. If I actually bring down the help menu, you can see that they match up, right? That is the help menu that I'm looking at. One of the other nice things you can do with Studio Shell is create your own items inside of these things. So if I'll create one called Click Me. And whenever someone clicks on that, we'll do something simple. We'll get the date, and we'll send it to the output pane. New item named Click Me, and then run that script whenever the person clicks on it. Right. So if I go back into the help menu, there's Click Me, and if I click it, stuff shows up the output pane. Right. So again, all those aspects of the SDK are there. Right, they're just very PowerShell-y now, and I can go in and talk to them and interact with them and things like that. What was that first command we talked about? Yeah. So what if I want to create a command in here, and I don't know how? I can do a get help new item, and Studio Shell will actually come back with customized help, context-sensitive help, depending on where you're working. So right now I'm in the command bars area. It comes in, oh, this creates a new control in a command bar pop-up menu. And it gives me specialized syntax if there's any specialized parameters that I need to know about. And again, this is implemented across that entire space, the debugger, the code, the project stuff, everywhere you go. You can always ask, what can I do here? How do I get this done?
Is this new items only session available for this session, or when you close the studio, are they still coming back or not?
It's a good question. It depends is the answer. So the window configurations stick. And they stick across multiple instances of Visual Studio. The UI elements have to go away. There's a trick that I have in here called what I call solution modules. Remember the modules we were importing, the Saki module? You can actually put one of those in your solution, and if Studio Shell sees it, it'll automatically load it. So if you have any UI changes you want to make, you can put it in there, and when the solution's loaded, it'll automatically make those changes for you. So I have another project I can open later and show you that happening. But yeah, the UI changes have to go away. They can't persist. All right. So okay, yeah, this is all good. All right, let's look at a real live example of how I've used this to solve some pretty massive problems. I'm going to go into the solution area. Look around, projects, what's in there. All right. I'm going to go ahead and open up Solution Explorer here and show you what I have open, so you can kind of follow me. Let's go into projects and look. Okay. So you see how I have inside of this folder that I'm in right now. There's three things, and inside of the solution there's 3 things. Right? So what I'm actually looking at right now is the solution tree of the solution I have loaded. And actually dig into the demo application and look around. And what am I looking at here? What is it listing for me? Yeah, the stuff that's in that project, right? And this is where it gets really interesting, right? So yeah, program.cs is a file on your hard drive, right? What's in there? Code, yeah, some program code, right? In fact, yeah, look, I have it open right here. There it is. So we got like a namespace and a class and some methods and stuff, right? Great code. It's fantastic code. You'll love it. But here's the interesting thing. To the SDK, that's not just a file. It's a code container, right? So what I can do is cd into the file, look around. Say I have 2 nodes there. I have item properties and a code model. Let's look at that code model. All right, what am I looking at? Import statements, using statements, and a namespace called demo solution. Right, let's go into demo solution. What's in there? Class. What's the name of the class? Program. Let's go into program and look around. What's this? Yeah, methods and properties of that class, right? Yeah. So if I actually look, in here, You can see like there's method 1, method 2, and method main. Method 1, method 2, all right. So neat, right? Why would you want to interact with your code this way? It's not like I'm going to come to the console just so I can start, I want to create a new class. I want to, do a new item and create a new class. I could. The console's about automating, right? It's not the first place to go to work, but when I need it, I really want it to be there. So this example I'm going to run through right now is actually very similar to a problem I just had with another client. Did a bunch of work for them, and they were happy, and then they came back to me with basically 3 times the code base that I did for them. I'm talking about several 100,000 lines of code. And they said, we're implementing coding strategies now, or what do they call it, static analysis. You guys familiar with this concept? FXCOP. You guys familiar with FXCOP, the tool? What does it do? You're nodding your head. What does it do?
I don't know exactly, but I remember reading about it a couple years ago. It's been around for a while.
Code analysis.
Yeah, code analysis. Basically, if you have conventions that you're supposed to follow, corporate conventions,
Yep.
FXCOP will tell you when you're not following those conventions. Won't fix it for you, but it'll tell you when you're not doing it. So they came back to me and they said, well, one of the things that we're doing is any property that is a Boolean property should start with the word is. Okay. Which is that's a good one, right? So like right here, I have this property is enabled, right? Let's look at the code real quick. I'll get rid of that. So I have all these properties down here. I have a couple of Boolean properties. So I have 3 Boolean properties. One's called is enabled, so he's safe, right? I don't need to change him. But then there's one called valid and one called running. And those would need to be changed, right? This is one file, right? I can do this by hand, one file. But if I'm talking about 300,000 lines of code, most of which I didn't write, how long would you guys expect to be digging through this? Okay, yeah. We're not talking about an afternoon. Right? This is a significant investment of your time. So I'm going to show you what I did. And I'm going to kind of work it out as I go. So bear with me. So if I do an ls in this area, right, I get back a list of things. The only things I want are properties. Right? So I'm going to build a pipe. Give me a list of things where, remember where? Where the thing looks like it's a property. Right? And I'll run that, and that isolated all my properties. Right? Hooray. And in fact, I'm just going to store those in a variable for succinctness. So I have a variable p that contains those properties. Right? But I don't want all my properties. Which properties do I want?
Don't start with.
I heard 2 things. What? Don't start with what?
Is.
All right, let's do that one first. Where name not match is. Is that good? All right. So I'll go ahead and assign that back into P. All right, and now P should contain those 3 properties. Cool. What was the other criteria?
Boolean.
They have to return a Boolean. All right. Okay, so we'll look at P where. Let's do this. I don't know. Kind of forgetting what I did here. So let's do we'll pass P to get member. That looks promising right there. Type. So let's do this. I'll show you another command. This is a really great one. Select object. Basically, if you have a whole list of things and you only want one little piece of it, you can do select object and give it a list of property names. It'll isolate those for you. And there's this expand property that basically means I just want this one thing. Right, so expand the type. It's like a bunch of import statements, but really, what is that? What can I do with those things? Oh, here we go. As full name. If I do p select object, expand type, and then we'll do another select object, expand as full name. And it doesn't like that because I misspelled it. Oh yeah, that's cool. So it's giving me back the type names there.
Yep.
right, so I need to modify this a little bit. So we'll add another where clause. Give me P where that type as full name matches bool. See if that works. Yeah. Cool. Those are the two that I want, right? So if I look at program, I have valid and running. We'll put that back into P. Processing those. Look at P. Valid and running. Okay, so I'll show you another command that's very popular for each object. What do you think this does? Yep. Yep. So for each thing, there's $under again. Actually, I don't remember what I need to do here. Hold on. See what I'm doing? See what I'm doing? I think there's a method on here I can call. There it is. Yeah. Rename symbol. That looks promising. So P, pipe it to for each object, and you'll have to spell it right when you do it. We'll call rename symbol. And we want to rename it. We'll do is. Let's see. Is, and then whatever the name is of the thing. I think that'll work. It may complain. Remember? Yeah. All right. So that was two properties in one file, okay? But the point I'm trying to make here, if I can do it for two properties and it took me that long, it doesn't matter if I have 2 or 20 or 200 or 2,000 or 200,000, and I don't have to know where they are. Right? I can let PowerShell figure it out for me. That script that I just ran, once I figured out how to get it done, took about 25 minutes to run. That was 300,000 lines of code, which is a whole lot better than spending a week of it with my eyes and my fingers. Getting what I started with. Yeah.
Well, that's changing the where you define. What about when they're using the message?
Like the, yeah. So somebody is good question. So the question is, I basically changed the name of these properties, but what about people who are invoking that property? Like if somebody's getting that property, has it changed for them as well? Is that the question? Yeah. Cool. All right.
Because otherwise it wouldn't compile.
You're absolutely right. So what I'll do here is I'll add a call here, is enabled, and it's amazing. Did I spell it wrong? Oh no, it's let's change that to static. There we go. All right. So I just added a call to is valid, right? And so if I go over to Studio Shell and I'll change this again. I'll add an underscore. I'll run the same command I did before, but now it's going to be underscore is instead of is. And I'm just doing that for brevity, and it changed it for me. Right. So yeah, so the rename symbol, and actually again, the SDK is very consistent. If you can actually set the name property of the same of that thing like if I got the enabled property object and I set the name. It will change the name, but it won't rename any of the symbols in the rest of the code. But if I invoke the name rename symbol method, it will, but it doesn't tell you that. Have fun with that.
What about the dependent objects? Say you have other source code objects with reference this. I mean, in this case, you're probably okay, but it wouldn't be public.
Sure. So and again, the rule of thumb is if it's loaded in Visual Studio, it'll work. If it's outside of Visual Studio, if it's in another project somewhere, you're out of luck. Right.
And it goes over all the source code in that?
It goes over whatever I tell it to. So like in this case, if I show you the console, I'm in a very specific spot. Right. That path. If I went back here.
Yep.
And we'll go back to the very beginning of this whole endeavor here. When I run the ls, right, that gives me a list of whatever's in there. There's actually a recurse, which I'm not going to run because it'll take forever to go through everything there. But basically that says find everything here and beneath, right? So that's basically what I used. Once I figured out how to do it for one file, I just backed up into Dallas Recurse and just ran through it all, and then I played with my kids for a while, and then came back and it was done. So, so again, there's a real world scenario of how this really helped me out of a jam. Don't come, like I said, this isn't the first place I come when I want to get something done, but if I got a Gordian knot and I want to slash it in half, that's what this is here for. Is there any questions?
So, this Studio Shell, am I correct, you are contained or restrained to just what's in Visual Studio, the project that's in Visual Studio, and the workings within there? You can't change source code of some other project in some other area or
so the question is, are you constrained to what's inside of Visual Studio? The answer is yeah. So like if I
can you do registry stuff and other things like that still?
Oh yeah, so anything you do in PowerShell you can do in here.
Okay.
Yeah.
But
So
source code and Visual Studio related, you are stuck in Visual Studio and that project or solution is loaded.
yeah. I'm trying to pull together a release, a new release of Studio Shell. One of the things I'm adding is the ability to do all of this stuff, interact with the DTT outside of Visual Studio. So you won't have to go in here and open the console. So if you want to just edit your project from here, from this console, you can. You just import the module Studio Shell, tell it you want to load this project, and it'll fire up Visual Studio, but you'll still be able to go through the DTE drive out here instead of inside of Visual Studio.
Is this, I'm assuming this is faster than using Visual Studio's find and replacing files? Or is it the same thing?
I don't know. I mean, find and replace won't tell you if it returns a Boolean.
Good point.
All
Right.
But yeah, and like I said, if there's a happy path, I'm on the happy path, right?
You can't use variables either, like you just did.
Correct.
The star
Yeah.
is or the star whatever.
Yeah.
Okay.
So again, I mean, this is like, if you think about the way an IT admin guy thinks about his servers, or her servers, excuse me, when they talk about scale, right, they're not talking about, oh, I need to do the same thing, I want to run this process 1,000 times. They're literally like, okay, I got to do this thing across each one of those servers, and I got to get the results back and figure out what failed, where it failed, and why it failed. And I'm basically taking the same approach to those kind of scale problems with code, right? Or UI, or what have you. Right. So we're getting close on time. If anybody has any questions at this point. Nope.
Well,
Right. Yeah.
one thing, with SharePoint has its own little modules of PowerPoint, PowerShell, and so does SQL. You can, if you've got it on one server, you can manipulate your Windows, SharePoint, and your SQL, all with PowerShell.
Yep.
Okay.
You can automate all of it. And I mean, the best part about it is it's repeatable, right? Once you figure out how to do it, you just save it to a script, and then you can run that script whenever you need to. And if you need to run that script on that computer, it's easy to do.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll just come over here and push a button. How's that? Anyway, this is a great place to go if you're looking for a script, you don't know how to do something, right? Go to poshcode.org. Somebody else has done it. It's on there. They have a really nice search capability. Codeplex is another site, if you guys are familiar with Codeplex. A lot of people are publishing their PowerShell stuff up there. Anybody familiar with NuGet, by the way? Anyway? Yeah. What is NuGet? Somebody tell me what NuGet is. Good answer. Anyway, yeah, NuGet is a packaging framework for .NET assembly. So, like, if you want to use a Hibernate, instead of downloading in Hibernate and setting up your project to use a Hibernate, you can just invoke NuGet, and it will pull the package down for you from the official repository and set up your project automatically. So you just get going, right? There's an initiative called I don't know how to pronounce it, PSUGet, which is NuGet for PowerShell modules. They're working on that right now. Basically, one guy from Microsoft, I don't remember his name, but he's working on it. That should be up soon, and I think once it's up, you're going to start seeing a whole bunch of stuff showing up there. That's a great place to go if you're looking for scripts. Before I let you go, this is where you go to get Studio Shell. studioshell.codeplex.com. I have a couple other projects that you might be interested in. Anybody work with RabbitMQ? Nope. Okay, never mind. Anybody work with MongoDB? Nope, never mind. Anybody work with ASP.NET membership? Gee whiz. All right, anyway, anybody work with Hibernate or Entity Framework? Yeah, okay. This is a project working on with a friend of mine named Brady Gaster. And so the idea is that if you use an Hibernate or Entity Framework to create a domain model, right, which is basically an object model for your database objects, this provider will take your domain model and create a provider in PowerShell for it. So you automatically get your CRUD operations on the console for free. And it just works. We've just done a little bit of work on it, but we're already pretty giddy about what you can accomplish with it. So that's it, guys. I really appreciate you coming and having me up here, and I hope you got something out of it. Again, this is my contact information if you want to get a hold of me. How do you guys normally do giveaways in here?
Nope.
Yep, it's working hard, huh?